faith and the vision, right? If they don't have the faith and the vision, you're not
Yeah.
going. Once sales drop, once the market gets small and shrinks, you're going to go back into those old ways in terms of trying to rely on Marvel, DC, Big Daddy, Marvel, Big Daddy, DC, because they're owned by big corporations. They're not really going to go anywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's another installation of Indie Comic Secrets. I got a dope guest in the back. This man right here. When you get to know him, when you get to see his art, his comic, you go like, man, there's some dope artists out here, some great creators. So I'm gonna introduce to you my man, my friend, YoungWavy. What up, YoungWavy?
Thank you. Thank you, and
Yes,
salute to
sir.
you.
Yes,
Just
sir.
thank you for having me again. Thank you for allowing me to just access your platform and just be here. You got a dope platform. Like I said, you're promoting independent work. You're promoting independent guys, and I respect that.
Yes, sir. Now I caught wind of you when I was watching Coffee. Coffee, man, that dude right there, he a motivated brother, and he
Absolutely.
always interview the coolest people. And I've seen you and him do like a couple of recordings together. And man, it was one video y'all did together where you had broke down the whole comic book history, like the comic book boom and all that stuff. And I was like, dang, my brother really know all his stuff, about the 90s boom and all that stuff. Most people don't know about the 90s boom. That
I,
really like put a dent in comic books.
I try my best to study the archives in the industry, because that's very important, especially when you're walking in this craft is 20% business, right?
Yeah,
So that's you have to study just the history itself, you know, and a lot of it is, the business aspects that I study, so going
yeah,
back that far is when comics were at its peak, American
yeah,
comics. So I got to
yeah.
study the peak.
It was at its peak, and I don't want to sound cliche, but it's so true. History repeats itself, man. So you got to study the good stuff, study the bad stuff, so you won't make those same mistakes. But this is the
Absolutely.
thing right here, man. The people want to know, what is Young Wavy's origins? How did Young Wavy get into comic books? Have that passion for comic books? Where did it all start, my brother?
Yes, sir. So it all started from elementary. Elementary. I couldn't read. I couldn't read or write in around third grade, fourth grade. I was very late and behind. I was very, a late bloomer. I was very behind. So I didn't grow up with my father in the house. So when I did see him, he did what he can. He did what he could, in the situation in terms of helping me. And the first thing he did was he brought me to a comic book shop because he was a collector. So, that was our way of bonding. Is he would either bring me to the comic book shop or he would bring me to the comic book movies. Like I grew up watching Marvel boom when Iron Man 1 came out. I was there day one. The Incredible Hulk came out. I was there day one. The entire first phase, second phase, third phase, I was there with my father. But that's where it all started. He brought me to a comic book shop, and that's where I learned how to read. And that's when I discovered, Marvel, and that's really where my love came from. My work is rooted in American comics.
That's dope. When I talk to everybody got that similar story. Their parents was the ones that got them into comics. Because my dad, I'll never forget, I was 7 years old, and it was mixed with like what you said. Like I was watching the X-Men animated series on Fox. Okay,
Okay.
didn't know about comics back then when I was 7 years old. My dad took me to a gas station, and they had a spinner rack, and I saw Jim Lee X-Men #1. Now, my 7-year-old mind, I didn't know that animation was based on that comic. I thought that
Absolutely.
comic was based on the animation. So I had to have it. And I said, Daddy, can you buy that for me? He didn't think none of it. So after that, every time we go to that gas station, I always had to get a comic. So I think that's pretty cool that our parents put this love for comic books. in our
Absolutely.
heads, you know?
You gotta. That's how we pass it on. Especially with this medium, this
Yeah.
craft. You got to pass it on to the next generation, and that's how we got into it, right? So
Yes, sir.
absolutely.
Now, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, uh, have you done work with any indie comic companies?
Um. So I've done work. I very rarely do any work for hire. I'm not a work for hire artist, so
Okay.
it's only now that I've started to actually focus and use work for hire as a means to level myself up and kind of
Yeah.
get my name out there, especially in this market, the American market. I think it's very important that that's what these publishers look at. It's like, who have you published with here? So
Yeah.
even if it's Marvel, DC, or what I'm currently working on is Flash Gordon. So, um,
Dope.
but I've worked with a small independent company called Saturday AM. Some people
Okay.
may know them for,
I
their
heard of them.
yes. Some people may know them for some of the controversial, aspects of recent years that they've kind of been in, or even some of the, you know, um, their popular stories like Apple Black. But I've done an anthology kind of one shot with them. That was like 2021, 2022, and my most, I would say, 'cause I don't even count that for one, and that's because
Gotcha.
they drew over my work, which was very disrespectful, and I didn't
Very
like that.
disrespectful. Yeah.
Even though I didn't own the license to the work, they drew over it, and they completely kind of just buried me in that sense. So
Yeah.
um, I don't count that. So my
Okay.
my my recent work that I'm currently working with is Mad Cave Studios, and I'm doing
That's
a
that's
short
dope.
story.
I know about Mad Cave. Mad Cave got a lot of licensing. Matter of fact,
Yes,
I'm looking at the Speed Racer they just dropped. I'm a big Speed Racer fan. I'm a
yeah,
huge Flash Gordon fan.
absolutely.
So I can't wait until you done with that. I'm definitely gonna pick that up.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
Flash Gordon is one of those iconic golden age type characters that I think is very underrated for some reason, but he stayed the test of time because every
absolutely.
generation you will see a new Flash Gordon comic book or animation or something. You know?
Yeah. I mean, Flash Gordon. I'm not even from that era, but from the research and the stuff I've read, the books I've read, he's a Flash Gordon is a pioneer of that kind of space opera, Star
Space Opera.
Wars, Star
Yeah.
Wars aesthetic. Even Star Lord is
I,
based off of Flash Gordon.
yeah.
You know,
Star Lord, Han Solo, Flash Gordon predates Star
yeah.
Wars. Have you seen the Flash Gordon movie, the live action?
Not the original. Now, I've just read the material that I was given in terms of the
You got
original, the
Yo,
books.
Wavy, you got to watch that joint, bro.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you like Marvel, DC, all them joints, this joint was dope. It came out like in the
Yeah.
early 80s, maybe late 70s. I'm thinking early 80s. Perfect.
I definitely have plans to
Perfect.
watch that and the animated series because I have a pitch that I'll be pitching for them because the work I'm doing for them right now, I'm just the artist, but
Yeah.
I have an idea that I could actually, I think I could revamp Flash Gordon to a point to where it can get some
Yeah.
new readers in. So I
Yes,
got an
sir.
idea for that.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you a question because you definitely know about the indie game. You mentioned Saturday AM, Man Cave. Most people
Yes,
don't know about them. Uh, but like Boom, IDW, Dynamite, Dark
yes,
Horse, Image,
yes.
those those big indies. Do you think it's beneficial for like indie creators to collab with those type of guys, those companies?
Only Image. The rest of them are just they're irrelevant at this point. They're
Okay,
very, their business model is completely old because their business model is primarily licensing, right? So
I
you know,
noticed that.
Dynamite, Boom, IDW, Dark Horse, all of them. They're just licensing companies because they're trying to stay afloat and they're trying to, one, milk those IPs for as much as they can, but it's not sustainable. And I've talked about this before, that licensing, every publisher that predates, like from the early 2000s to 90s, they went out of business as soon as they started diving into the licensing game, right? So Dreamwave was a product
See,
of that,
that's why I
you
love
know.
that you here, brother, because you got the knowledge. I'm a big Gene Wade Pat Lee fan.
I
And
love
if anybody know about how he did Transformers, bro,
absolutely.
he did a absolute dope job with Transformers. But I noticed when he started doing those licenses, because a lot of people don't know he did TMT too. He had that
Yep.
license too.
LaShawn Thomas was on that. Yeah.
LaShawn Thomas. And as soon as he started doing that, they went away. They
And
went
that's
away.
because you got to pay to sustain these licenses, right? And even if you make a small bit of profit off these licenses, these are old characters, and they're not. There's no real long term, longevity with them. There's no real
Yeah,
long term gain with licenses. You have to always create. The only long term gain you can get is if you create original characters, original
yeah,
stories, and those original characters, original stories gain an original fan base, a new audience, a new fresh, breath of fresh air. So
yeah,
all of these companies will be following in the footsteps of a lot of these older publishers. And Dreamwave is a perfect example of that.
yeah.
Sadly,
Most definitely.
because Dreamwave had a lot of original work that was they just needed to focus on more than the licenses, right?
Yeah.
And yes, but
And,
I
and
think
see, I'm glad you're here, bro, because
yeah,
I never understood that licensing game in comics. I
yeah,
just never understood it. Like it has to be short term because I know it's so much when it comes to the contracts, so much that you can do with those characters, how long you can use those characters.
yes,
Why would you want to build your company off something you don't own? I never
yep,
understood that.
exactly. And to go back to, do I think these, the only relevant publisher I think these indie creators should focus on is Image Comics, because they focus on original work and building original work. So a lot of, if just imagine this, if all these independent companies like Iconic Comics, um, Rippaverse, all these big companies that are coming up, even Antarctic Press, right? Just imagine these imprints under Image, all under Image, just doing what Ghost Machine is doing what SkyBound is doing what Top Cow is doing.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine the unity and the audience that we can grow and rejuvenate in this industry. They would easily pass up Marvel and DC,
Yeah.
um, if we were just all under one umbrella, of original work, original, and like Image, you could do your own thing. You could be your own publisher under that imprint, under that
Yeah.
publisher. So it that's the only thing that makes sense for me.
Let me ask you a question though. Okay. Uh we know all the indies so far with your like your Dynamite, your Bones, IDW. Uh it seemed like Dark Horse and Image is like the two big top dogs, but I think isn't Dark Horse in trouble or something along those
Dark
lines?
Horse got sold to I believe a gaming company of some sort. I forget the
Oh,
actual
okay.
company. I
Okay.
forget the actual company, but they got sold a while back by this larger company. So Dark Horse is no longer creator owned, right? So
Yeah.
Dark Horse is purely just a licensing company, and even the small bit of creator owned stories they have and may be published, they don't really go anywhere because their focus is on the licenses. Their
Yeah.
primary focus is on, and all of their resources and all of their profit and all of their revenue goes to sustaining those licenses. So um, they won't be around. They won't be around
Yeah.
for much longer. Like if you think a decade or two down the line, they won't be relevant. They're not relevant now.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard this first. Stay away from them licensing companies, man.
That's that's a ship you can't build with. You can't build off of that.
You can't win.
You can't.
Now I was watching and man, yeah, I can't wait for part two. You guys, you and Coffee was reacting to the Image Comics documentary.
Yes.
And what I noticed about Image, because I was a big Image fan, uh, those the founding fathers, you
Yes.
really don't hear much from them anymore. Like your Your Todd McFarlane. Todd McFarlane might be still the one that's really doing some work.
Yes.
To me, the most talented out the founding fathers is Mark Silvestri. And a lot of people might be saying, well, Phantom J, what about Jim Lee? Jim Lee kind of folded, even though he's the
Absolutely.
best artist. But to me, Mark Silvestri did what Image was all about, as far as breaking new talent, giving
Yes.
us dope new characters. But what I notice is, I guess what I'm saying is Robert Kirkman. Seems like
Yes.
Robert Kirkman is the main guy now, and the founding fathers have kind of fell back. Why do you think the founding fathers fell back?
Well, the vision wasn't concrete from the beginning, because even when you go back and you look at all of those interviews, um, Todd McFarlane and Mark Silvestri, the thing they have in common is, and thing that Robert Kirkman have in common, the founders that have in common now, even like Jim Valentino, he doesn't get a lot of respect in the game, but Jim Valentino is the most respectful. I mean, I
Yeah,
have the most respect for Jim Valentino out of all of the founders, outside of,
got you.
in terms of the actual publisher, as a
Silverhawk.
veteran.
Is it
Yeah,
Silverhawk? Is it
it's
Silverhawk?
Shadowhawk. Yeah.
Shadowhawk. Shadowhawk. Yeah.
But as a publisher, as a veteran, he's the one who brought in, Robert Kirkman. He brought in a lot of guys, but he brought in a lot of indie guys he was focusing on, when he was publisher at Image. He brought in a lot of the indie guys, that kind of, sustained Image. But going back to just the founders, and kind of why they fell off, and kind of, it's just the vision. They didn't have the same vision. Wildstorm,
Yeah.
the only, like, Top Cow and McFarlane and SkyBound are the ones that are focused on kind of building Image as a brand, and staying focused on building a new platform for creators to own their own work, and get out of the cycle of Marvel and DC. But,
Yeah.
I would say, Todd McFarlane's the only one that stayed true to that. Even Mark Silvestri kind of folded in a sense. Got a lot of respect for him, especially, in the early 2000s. But he eventually went back and focused a lot on DC, and did that Batman, Deadly Duo, which was excellent work. But imagine him doing that with his Darkness, or carrying his own original work, putting that amount of effort into Top Cow instead of DC, and
Yeah.
going back to those. I mean, just imagine if he would have did that issue, just a run of
Yeah.
a Darkness, a Witchblade, or any Top Cow universe, or even any new work. Top Cow, it would have been in a totally different position than it's, in now, in terms of, how far they've kind of fell.
Yeah.
Um, but it goes down to the vision. It comes down to the vision, in terms of, what was the original vision. The original vision was to break away from the big two, and build your
Yep.
own platform that benefits creators, and
Yeah.
passing that on to the creators, and bringing them back in. Because right now, Image right now is they have a lot to work on. They have a lot of potential, but they've also failed too, because all they do is recycle Marvel and DC talent.
Yeah.
They don't bring a lot of guys in, just to do Image original work, just original work. Bringing indie guys that have no interest in Marvel and DC, indie guys that just want to sit down at Image and create a career for themselves, like a Robert
Yeah.
Kirkman. You know, dedicated guys like that is why they've kind of fell, and they're not focused on those type of creators, and they're out here.
And you're right, because okay, when Image first started, and I could say from the late '90s to the early 2000s, they broke out a lot of new talent. Just Mark
Yes,
Silvestri alone. Mark Silvestri alone gave us legends in the game, like your
yes,
your Michael Turners, your Joe Benitez, your Dave Finches.
yes.
He gave us a lot of bangers. Uh,
Even
I'll
Craven,
even say
even Craven Clean, or if I'm pronouncing his name right,
Clayton
Clayton
Crane.
Crane. Yes,
Yeah,
the guys like that.
and then it just seemed like after a while it just stopped. And
Yes,
and I know it's artists out there on that level. It just seems like things in Image is a well-oiled machine.
yes,
Okay, they good at distributing. They good at promoting. They good at turning properties into movies, animations, all that stuff. But
Yes.
it just seemed like it stopped with the new talent, though.
That goes down to, the faith and the vision, right? If they don't have the faith and the vision, you're not
Yeah,
going, once sales drop, once the market gets small and shrinks, you're going to go back into those old ways in terms of trying to rely on Marvel, DC, Big Daddy Marvel, Big Daddy DC, because they're owned by big corporations. They're not really going to go anywhere, so they kind of just free work, right? Free money in that sense. But if you stay true to the vision, you could have built. Image could have been past Marvel and DC,
I
um,
agree.
and they're kind of stagnant, stuck in that third place right now in the market.
Yeah,
But with all their independent publishers underneath Image, even SkyBound is on a Marvel and DC level. Like SkyBound right now is Image's largest imprint. Their largest market share is within
it
SkyBound
is.
right now. So
Yeah,
um, I mean, they could have done a lot more. Even I mean, Robert Kirkman. While we're on that, Robert Kirkman is very smart, and he's kind of learned from Dreamwave because even though he has the Transformers license, he built his own original story tied into the Transformers universe and the Transformers license. So that shows you how smart Robert Kirkman is. With Void Rivals.
hey, let me tell you something. You spot on.
Yeah.
I got this slabbed. I normally don't slab at all, but this series
Yes.
is so good,
Yeah.
so original, and he's using the Transformers and GI Joe to boost this up.
Yes, to
That's
build his
how you
own
do
work.
it.
Yes, yes, that's how you
Yeah.
do it. So,
That-
Dave Felici is the artist for that. I love his work. He did one of my favorite works from Robert Kirkman, Oblivion Song, which was the previous work he did, which doesn't
yeah.
get a lot of credit for how interesting that sci-fi series was. And
Yeah.
I'm a big sci-fi guy. I specialize in science fiction, so that was a great work. But that's the model. That's how you do it right. So Robert Kirkman
Yeah.
knows that Transformers, he's not going to have that forever. G.I. Joe, he's not going to have that forever. Void
Yeah.
Rivals, he will have that. You know,
That's all his.
yeah,
That's all it is. So, hey, you make a good point, man. Robert Kirkman, he killing it, man. He definitely killing it. I want to ask you this though. You said something really interesting. Okay, we both know how Image started, but we know that two guys, the founding fathers, went back to Marvel and DC, which was
yes,
Jim Lee and Rob.
yes,
Mark Silvestri, he went back. I
yes.
think the only guys that never did go back and stay strong. No, I take that back. Eric Larson, I think he went back to Marvel. This was like more recent. More
Okay,
recent, he went to Marvel.
okay.
I think Todd, Jim Valentino is the only two that didn't fold and go back.
The only two, and
But you know
I'm
what? I take that back. I think Todd went back because isn't it the Spawn and Batman cover
he,
or
he
something?
he did a crossover. I don't count crossovers. I don't count
Okay.
crossovers. So
Okay.
crossovers promote
Yeah,
promote
because that
Spawn.
promotes your character, right?
Like Top Cow had a lot of
Yeah.
crossovers too, but when what Mark Silvestri did, that where he went wrong is he went back and did a Hulk series. He went back and did a X-Men or Avengers series.
Yeah.
He went back and did Batman when he could have just focused all that time and effort. And you don't get a lot of work from Mark Silvestri. He's a veteran. He's 40. He's 40 years in the game. You don't get a lot of
Yeah.
work from him. So when you
Yeah.
do get work from him and it's not his original work, it just puts a sour, bitter taste in my mouth. Because
Yeah.
wow, man, that series Batman was just so excellent. He mastered the craft, man. If only that was the darkness, right? If only that was
Yeah.
fucking, in or even Cyberforce. Because I love Hunter Killer. If only it was those characters, he could have propped it up
Yeah.
and built up. But
Cause
man,
cause me and you both know the darkness. The darkness has the potential to be bigger and better than Batman. You know
and
what I
it's
mean?
been there. It's been there at early 2000s. Top Cow was killing it. Early
Yeah.
2000s, Top Cow was killing it. Witchblade got an anime adaptation, the first American comic book series to get an anime adaptation. Marvel copied that method with their Marvel anime adaptations as well, from a
Yeah.
Japanese studio. I may add, and then Darkness got the 2K games, so two 2K games, right? So
Yep.
which was high production,
And that first
very
Darkness game, I never did play the second, but that first one was dope. That was a
very
dope
high
game.
production. You know,
Yeah.
very high
Yep.
production. They even got the live action Witchblade as well. They had, so early 2000 Top Cow was on the rise. Where they folded was when they got when they really let the decreasing market get to their head. They should have stayed
Gotcha.
strong. Should have
Yeah.
stayed strong. Buckle down.
Yeah.
Hey, if you gotta stay lean and mean, stay lean and mean until you can get the sales and get the readership back up. But you need to buckle down, decrease if you gotta decrease, budget. Stay very very slim because even Antarctic Press has been around for 40 years because they've kind of stayed lean and mean, stayed slim, stayed focused on one or two, even three titles, a month. Just that's how you survive if you gotta until you get those
Yep.
numbers back up, right? You don't go back and go to DC and Marvel and think that that's gonna bring you a new audience.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work like that. Not
And
anymore.
you know what? I discovered I'm familiar with Ben Dunn, Antarctic Press.
Yeah.
I discovered how he stayed strong so long. He
Yes.
he came up with a great marketing tool, marketing strategy. How he survived so long is he uses the fans. And I
Yeah.
and I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is, let's just say he come out with an anthology book.
Yes.
It's not gonna be just his in-house team doing the book. He welcomed the fans to do some art for the book too.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
just think like, oh, I can be in a and then a press book. They was like one of the first ones to bring in anime manga.
Yep.
Man, yeah, sure. I'll definitely do that. I
Absolutely.
think that's a great strategy though.
That's a model that was I mean that model itself is it's not anything new. You see
Yeah,
a lot of that from the Japanese. Japanese do that.
yeah,
You know, uh, I believe I mean, I can't really think of any other publishers that really did any fan art kind of prints. Then like Antarctic Press was really one of the pioneers of that. Definitely, in terms
yeah.
of that being part of their model. So
He got a
definitely
Ninja High School 200 coming out, and all fan art, mostly fan art.
okay. And
So this
you
this
know,
this is a big giant book, number 200, mostly fans. Now, of course, it's been Dunn's work in there, uh, but he told the fans, let loose. He said, just as long as you have everything in by this date.
yeah.
Now,
Okay.
can you imagine how much art he got from that? You
Oh
know what I
yeah,
mean?
no, yeah,
And,
definitely for
and,
sure.
and customers, that's two
Yes,
birds with one stone, you know?
yes. So
And can you remember back in the day, not to cut you off, but can you remember back in the day, you'll be flipping through a comic book, and then at the very end, you see the letters. And then what
yes,
would you see in those letters too?
you
Every
would
blue moon,
you would see some fan art. You definitely
you
would
would
see
see
some.
fan art.
You would see some fan art.
But
It,
in
it was
these new
rare.
comics, you don't get that no more.
You don't. You don't, and that's part of the reason why we got a writer focused industry now. We got
Yeah,
a writer focused industry, and the writer focused industry they kind of bring a lot of the aspects of different literature. Different aspects of like the novel format, different aspects of the book fiction format, and that goes down to even the covers. The covers they treat like an album cover, right? With modern comics, which is a shame because golden age comics and even the Japanese, they use their issues as a jumping on point, as a magazine, as a way to market their actual trade paperbacks or their volumes, market anything they have going on. So you have all these space on these new covers that where you can be marketing, you can be advertising, you could be doing so much of your own, promoting yourself so much, and that's something I do with my own issues in my own magazine, right? Is you utilize all the space. Even on the covers, your cover should
yeah,
tell a story. Utilize that. Utilize the
yeah,
back cover. Utilize the cover. It doesn't need to be an album cover. So
yeah,
that's why you don't see a lot of letter pages at all now. You don't even see letter pages a lot, or that'll be the bare minimum. You don't
yeah.
really, you wouldn't see any real actual engagement with your audience on that level, like a Stan Lee started with, with the Marvel bullpen that he did.
Yeah. I love that you said that. Seemed like back in the day, every inch of the book was used for the customers to you know what I'm saying, to get the
Grab your
most out
attention,
of it.
right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't just an illustration. It was something that told you about the story. It literally told you what was going on. It like give you a hint of the plot, something on the cover that tells you, hey, pick this up, and oh, this is interesting, right?
yeah. Uh Last little thing that I want to say about the image guys. I
Yes.
was watching you and Coffee, and y'all was talking about like Marcel Vestra got a comic book called Hunter Killer, and you was breaking down how he had like a hybrid manga and West style to himself. I
Yes.
noticed Rob Liefeld, his earlier stuff, I wouldn't say as far as uh the look, but the
Yes.
designs, like armor and stuff like that, you could tell that was very anime manga. Joe
Yes.
Madureira.
Yes.
Uh, to me, he kind of popped out as the first hybrid anime manga
Yes.
western type of guy. You
Yes.
know, so
And
was these guys ahead of the game?
um, yes, yes, they definitely were. So, but Joe Mad, he grew up. So let's break it down like this. Manga really started to come into the West, the Western industry in the '80s, right? So started coming around in the '80s, late '80s, late '90s. That's when creators of that era started pulling from a lot of inspiration from that work. So Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane started to really pull from a lot of that energy, a lot of that
Yeah,
work. Akira Berserk, a lot of Ghost in the
yeah,
Shell, stuff like that, old stuff like that. So as they evolved and grew and started building studios, these studios and these creators started pulling from them, and they started to master the style. So Stephen Platt, Joe Mad comes out of this era. Michael Turner, David Finch. A lot of those artists learned from them, so they started mastering that technique, mastering that era. So they solidified the style. So
yeah,
that's why Joe Mad's style looks so solidified, because he studied from those creators. He came out of that era when those creators were doing that. So he pulled from it. Right, that's something that I do now. So my work now may look even more Japanese because I came up in an era where, one, the Western creators already had a little Japanese in their work, but now I'm very much exposed to Japanese artists. So I'm pulling from both sources of, hey, this is 50-50 over here in the West, and this is 100%. So my work just, it has that I would say 70-25 ratio, right? So I got a lot of Mark Silvestri in my work, but Mark Silvestri is a 50%. He's got manga, he's got American influences, so it, they've mastered it. So I pull a lot of
yeah.
from those guys, even you know, a- again with Pat Lee. He's another one
Pat Lee.
that pioneered and solidified that style.
Yeah, I forgot about Pat Lee. Pat Lee had that hybrid style too.
And he came out
Uh,
of Image.
he did. He
Yeah.
did. He came out of Image, and I want to say his first works, I got it too, was a book called because it had like a You ever seen an anime called Records of Lodoss War? You ever heard that? It's a
I,
very
I,
old
I
anime.
believe I believe so, and I
He
get
had a
where you're.
book called Warlands that was kind of
Yes,
based on that. Yeah,
yes, yes, and that was out of Image. Pat Lee he started at Extreme Studios, so he came out directly from those guys, those studios.
yep,
So
yep. And I think he changed the game because he was the first one to use digital coloring or something along those lines, Photoshop or along those lines, and he just boom, he just blew up after
yes,
that. Yeah,
he well, Pat Lee, he solidified the anime inspiration, not so much the manga, but the actual anime, the
gotcha,
animation,
gotcha.
style and inspiration. That's what he pulled in his work. So that's where the
Okay.
coloring and all of that comes from.
That's interesting. I never thought about it like that too, because of course it is a difference in manga and anime. But you're
Yes,
right. He put more of the anime in his books than the manga style.
yes,
Yeah, you're exactly right. Uh Speaking of manga, you have a comic book called Holy Ark.
yes. What's
Uh
up?
Can you explain Holy Ark, like the characters? What is your goal for that book? What is Holy Ark all about?
Yes. So Holy Ark is my first self-published series. It takes place in a world where a supernova occurs, and the basically the radiation from the supernova, and people that don't know, supernova is when the sun explodes. So the sun explodes, the radiation from the sun um, scorches the earth, and the cause of that, the radiation, gave birth to a new organic mutation, a new organic uh, gene. So it basically gave life to organic and mutations, essentially. So basically, now these organic mutations, they feed off of human life, and it takes place about 50 years after the supernova, where there's a new regime, a new government, um, the last of humanity. And Dominic Haywire is the protagonist that is a part of this new regime, this task force that is sent to take out these new organic mutations. And Dominic Haywire is a weapon created for that cause. And
Okay, dope.
he comes across and this is within the latest chapter. He comes across a human born from a diffusion, and this causes him to question um, his actual purpose and what he's actually doing, and kind of what, you know, whether or not the actual new regime's way of, eradicating these new mutations is the way. So he conducts his own illegal experimentations from then on, and he's trying to find his own way to put a end to this diffusion mutation.
Okay. Hey man, I'm already sold. I need to give me a copy. I was looking at your artwork on Instagram. Man,
Yeah,
top tier, brother. And I'm not just saying that because you here. I
thank
can
you.
tell you really put time into the craft. And what I love about coffee, I learned a lot about the manga format. Does your book follow that format, that manga format?
Yes, I am versatile, so I can flip back and forth from manga and American comics in terms of their format. My work is a hybrid, a complete hybrid in the sense of format to artwork.
Okay.
So I'm currently Holy Ark is I'm currently working with a Japanese publisher and a Japanese editor right
Congratulations,
now.
brother.
Yes, and thank you. I've been submitting Holy Ark to Kodansha, is the publisher. I won a newcomers award from their Young magazine, which is where Akira is comes from.
Wow.
And
Okay.
my work was compared to the likes of Akira and Attack on Titans in terms of
Wow.
when the editorial actually read it.
Yeah.
So they gave me a newcomers award for that, and they told me they want to work with me more, and that was because of Holy Ark. So that and for people that don't know, the editorial department is one huge building with different floors. Each floor is its own magazine, so it's technically its own publisher. My work got seen from the entire editorial department in terms of
Wow.
every other floor. My work got around, so
Yeah.
I have connections with four different editors from four different magazines right now.
And let
But
me tell you something, brother, not to cut you off, but
yes.
from what I know about Japan, uh, your work got to be banging because it's a little gatekeeping going on over there in Japan.
Oh,
So that your if you want to hear what Young Wavy have to say about gatekeeping in Japan and the rest of this interview, join the Patreon in the description below.
Living it up.